Mitchtram here. If you fish with a spinning reel long enough, especially when you're using braid, eventually you're going to end up with one of these. And you probably have if you've been fishing a spinning reel. But here's the thing. People call this a wind knot, but most of the time, the wind didn't actually tie that knot. The wind, it may have helped, and it may have made it worse, right? But most of the knots start well before the wind had anything to do with it. Something happened before you cast it. A loop gets reeled onto the spool, or line twist builds up. Maybe the spool was overfilled. You close the bell with the handle and start reeling in slack line. On the next cast, all of that line jumps off at the same time, and that's where these loops come from. So what we're going to talk about today is how wind knots form. I'm going to walk you through what causes them, how to prevent them, or at least most of them, and then what to do when you see one before it cinches down, or also when you see your spool not looking quite right, how to fix that before it turns into a wind knot. All right, let's talk about what a wind knot actually is. And to understand that, you kind of have to understand how a spinning reel works versus a bait caster. So you think about a bait caster, that spool is spinning, right? So when you get a backlash, what happens is the spool is turning faster than the bait is being pulled out. So on a spinning reel, the spool isn't spinning during the cast, the line is coming off in coils. So this makes a spinning reel much easier to cast, right? The downside is if there's loose loops sitting on that spool, it can come off with the rest of the line at the same time. And essentially, those loops go through each other. It jumps forward, one loop catches another, they run through the guides, and by the time you notice it, you've got a knot somewhere between the reel and the rod tip. Sometimes it's even further out and you see it out there and you're like, oh man. It's really not the wind tying the knot in the line. It's usually those loose loops, the line twist, or poor line lay showing up during the cast. And that's the detail that really makes a big difference. If you keep thinking the wind is the only problem, you're never going to fix the actual cause or be able to prevent these things in the first place. Now, as we get into it, the first thing you want to do is always close the bell by hand. I know it sounds kind of basic, but that's one of the little habits that fixes a lot of these problems. So instead of reeling to close the bell, take your hand and close the bell by hand. And then when you turn the handle, you want to grab your line like that for just a moment to get the slack out of it and reel up. When you turn the handle and you close the bell, a lot of times that first wrap goes on very loose. Sometimes the line doesn't even get seated in the roller right away. It may kind of loop over itself or lay kind of cattywampus or sideways on the spool, so to speak. And if you do that over and over again, eventually those loose loops, they wrap and they stack up on top of each other. Then you make a cast and that line just blows up and goes through each other. So close the bell by hand, then make sure the line is in the line roller. Then pull the line tight and start reeling. It's not fancy, so to speak. It's not a special trick. It's just a good habit that helps prevent these knots. And if you fish spinning reels with braid, this matters even more because the braid is so limp. It doesn't have the same stiffness that mono has, and that's why it casts so well, right? But it also means loose loops come off the spool really, really easily. So you don't get wind knots as much with mono or fluorocarbon, although you can. So with braid, it's key to do these things. Closing that spool by hand, make sure it's in the roller, pull it tight. And it seems kind of tedious, but once you get in the habit, it comes as second nature. So if you take one thing from this video, take that. Close the bell by hand. Don't reel in slack line. That one habit will prevent probably 90% of wind knots. The next thing to think about is overfilling the spool. This is another kind of big part of this, right? When a spinning reel spool is filled right, the line should come off nice and smooth. But if you fill it too close to the edge, especially with braided line, that line can kind of come off in almost like a section. So you want to make sure you have a little bit of space between the line and the lip of the spool. You want enough line on that spool that it casts well, but not so much that it's spilling over the lip of the spool. I know that's a balance. If you underfill it, you lose casting distance, but if you overfill it, the line wants to jump off in big chunks or big loops. Those extra loops, they turn into wind knots. Now, every reel is a little different, but as a general rule, I like to leave a little bit of space below the top of the lip, say about 1/8 of an inch. If you just spooled your reel and you immediately start getting wind knots, that's the first thing to look at. You may just have too much line on the reel. Easy fix, just pull some off, get it below the spool's edge and try again. Now, line twist. This applies more to your mono and your fluorocarbon, and probably more to fluorocarbon than mono because fluorocarbon is more springy, right? Line twist and wind knots, they go together, and if you have line twist, a lot of times those turn into wind knots. And you can get line twist with braid, but it's not nearly as common as with mono or fluoro. So a spinning reel puts twist into the system because of how the bell wraps around the spool. That's just how it works, right? But some baits make that worse. If you think about like an inline spinner, spoons, soft plastics that roll on the retrieve, they cause that line twist too. So it's not just the inline spinners, it's not just the spoons. And when that line twist builds up, that line starts wanting to coil and loop. Then you make a cast and those coils come off the spool, and now you've got this wind knot in your mono or your fluoro. So if you keep getting wind knots and you're doing everything else right, look at the bait that you're throwing and how it's acting in the water. Reel it in and watch it closely. Is it tracking straight, or is it spinning or rolling over? If the bait's spinning every time you cast back, that twist is going to end up on your line after every cast. Eventually it's going to show up as a wind knot. You can use a small swivel if the bait naturally spins like an inline spinner or spoon. The last thing to do is check the line roller right here. This can cause a problem as well. That roller is supposed to roll as the line comes in. It needs to spin. If it's dirty, if it's seized up, maybe it's got some sand in it, maybe it just needs to be lubricated. If it keeps twisting line, you can check the line roller. And it's easy to do this. Sometimes you can run your finger over it and feel it spin. But if you can't feel it spin, if you can't tell for sure that it's spinning, then you can take a rubber band and run a rubber band back and forth on it. I don't have one, unfortunately, but if you have a rubber band, you can roll it, move it back and forth, and it should move very smoothly. And you can just compare that to rubbing it against something that doesn't have a roller in it, and you'll be able to tell the difference. So if that's not moving, then you need to clean it, lubricate it. Now, wind does make these knots worse typically. I don't want to sound like wind doesn't matter, because it does. And wind absolutely can make them worse. If you cast into the wind slows the bait down, the line's still coming off the spool, but the bait isn't pulling it cleanly. So now you have a lot more loose line in the air and loose line on the water. And if you don't pull that line in tight, then you're going to end up with these loops all over the spool. And the next cast or two, you're going to end up with a wind knot. When you're in the wind, try to use a lower sidearm cast if you can. Try not to throw overhand up in the air, because it will catch and it will just kind of stall and more line will come off, and then you have to deal with all that extra line. The wind may be part of the problem, but it usually exposes bad line management more than it creates the whole problem itself. So let's talk about fixing one of these things. The first thing is, don't keep cranking or try to jerk it out. That's the worst thing you can do. Worst thing you can do. And it works sometimes. I mean, I see people do it. You know, they'll just take it and they'll pull really hard and it will pop out. Sometimes that works, but a lot of times all that's going to do is cinch it down. So the last thing you really want to do is just add a bunch of tension on it. Don't reel against it either. Don't pull on it. Don't jerk it. Like I said, a loose loop, it's easy to fix. A tight knot, it's a whole different deal. So what we want to do is we want to pick this out very gently. And I just made this one out in the front yard, kind of pitching into the road and reeling up slack. So I don't know if this is going to come out or not. But what you want to do is you want to try to pick the loops out to loosen this thing up. And then pull a little bit maybe. And I may not be able to get it out, but I'm going to pick at it a little bit and see if I can. There we go. I think I got it. There we go. Like that. Pretty simple if you catch it before you tighten it up. That's the first thing, right? You've got one. That's how you fix it. Don't pull on it immediately. Try to pick it out gently and then slowly pull gently to get it out. Now, the second thing you'll notice is sometimes you'll notice that the spool has loops on it. And if you look at this one, there's one right there. See how it's very loose and it's hanging on to the side of the spool? And here's one that's reeled up on it. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to flip your bell open and pull it off. What'll happen is if you do that, it'll pull all that off and it may cause a wind knot. So the best thing to do is leave your bell closed, loosen your drag up until it's super loose. And then pull your line off like this until you get all that loose loop off. See, we got it off. If I would have flipped the bell and pulled it off, there's a good chance it would have caused that wind knot because it all would have come off at the same time instead of coming through the line roller. So those are your two ways to fix these nasty things. Okay, so sometimes you can't get it out. And here's when you have to cut it. If the knot is cinched down so hard, you can't pick it out. There's just no way. You've played with it. It's just not coming out. You have to cut the line. If you get the knot out and then your braid looks frayed in that area, I would cut it. You know, you don't want to have that weak spot in your braid. If it's mono or fluoro and you pick it out and then you see kinks in that line, especially with fluoro, you definitely want to cut it and retie. Now, there's a challenge here, right? Because depending on how far out it is, it may be too much line and you may need to tie it together, right? And at that point, you have to use one of your line joining knots. Something like a double uni works good for the same type of line. There's a lot of different ones out there. Optimally, if you can just leave that line off, that's better, but you may not be able to. None of this is really complicated, but it's habits that you have to form, and it seems like extra work and kind of irritating at first, but once you get into the habit, it becomes second nature. And if you do these things, you'll cut way down on your wind knots. You're probably not going to be able to eliminate every single one of them. I don't think anybody will, but you'll prevent most of them. And also, when one does happen, you'll catch it early before it turns into a big mess, probably. Think about it this way. Wind knots, they're not really random. Most of the time, they're telling you something. Your spool is too full, the line is too loose, the bait is twisting the line as it's coming on, or you're reeling slack onto the reel without thinking about it. The wind will make it show up faster, but the real problem starts way before that cast. The things that cause a wind knot are already in place by the time you make that cast. So look at your spool, look at the line, look at how you're closing the bell, and whether the bait is spinning. Don't overthink it. Just make a habit of looking down at your reel more often and doing these things, and you'll eliminate probably 99% of these things. If you've dealt with wind knots in the past, let me know how you've resolved them. Have you used the things that I've done? Did I miss something? Drop a comment. I love to chat. I read every comment and I respond to them. And if this helped you out, subscribe to the channel. We drop simple, practical, and honest fishing videos every week. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next one.